Hello, this is Faith at Faith and Books. I'm having a very quiet Saturday, getting some laundry done, taking things slow, and I've also been working on my Latin. So I thought that we could do a little Latin translation. I've been trying to read through the book of Luke in both Latin and English. And this is the text I'm using. It's published by Ex Fontibus Company. So it's got Latin on one side and English on the other. And I'm trying to read a chapter a day, but I'm only in chapter 4. I finished up chapter 4. So I'm a little behind since it's December 7th. But anyway, I decided as part of my study to just pick one line out of chapter 4 and try to parse it. So parsing is not diagramming. It's when you go through something and you look at each word and you label all its grammatical properties. So if it's the subject, if it's a verb, what tense and what voice and what mood is it in, and that sort of thing. So I decided to do that, and it got really interesting unexpectedly. And so I decided that I would share it with you, and I even typed it up because I wish I could edit and put the words right on the screen, but I don't know how to do that. So instead I typed it up and put it on this little clipboard, and I'm going to read it to you, except it's backwards on the camera, so I'm going to read. I wrote it out down here when I was taking notes, when I was studying. Anyway, this is from Luke. It's chapter 4, line 38. Or verse 38. All right, and it says, Surgeons autem. I'm going to use the church pronunciation. The classical pronunciation has hard G's and C's always. Their V's are W's. But since this is Christian content, I'm going to use the church pronunciation, which is more Italian. It's got soft C's and G's in front of E's and I's like in English. And you pronounce the V. There's a couple other little differences, but they don't show up here. Anyway, so I'm going to read it. Surgens autem Jesus de, or it could be Jesus, de synagoga introivit in domum Simonis, Socrus autum Simonis tenebator magnis febribus et roga. I know how to say this, it's just I get tongue-tied when I'm trying to record. Roga verunt illum pro ia. So maybe I should do that one more time. Surgeons autem Jesus de synagoga introivit in domum Simonis, Socrus autem Simonis tenebator magnis febribus et roga verunt illum pro ea. All right, so what does that mean? Well, when you're first looking at it, you can probably recognize some words right away, like Jesus. You can probably figure out that synagoga means synagogue. This probably has something to do with Simon. In is probably a preposition kind of related to our in. You might know pro, like quid pro quo or something like that, pro bonus. So some words are going to be familiar right off the bat. But then, let's see how to start. I'll just go through and talk about each word first. So surgeons is the present participle of the word meaning to rise. So this is rising is how you would translate it. And it comes from the verb surgo, surgere, surrexi, surrectum. So it's related to our word surge, and it's also related to the word resurrection, right? A surrexi, surrectum. So it means rising. Autumn is a weird word here. Julius Caesar and like more classical writers used it to mean kind of a soft however. I think they call it a post-positive. You never put it at the beginning of a sentence like you would in English with however. But it's sort of a soft contradiction or where you're about to state something that's at variance, similar to English. So if I started a sentence with, however, so-and-so, it would mean that I was going to contradict or be at variance with what came before, right? But if I didn't do that, if I made the however come after the subject, it softens it a little bit. So, so it's the same thing. This is a softened kind of however. But, or however, here it is not used in that way. It's used as sort of a device to let you follow an ongoing narrative, because back in those days they didn't really use punctuation, and the gospel is a narrative, right? And so in order to clue you in that something is going to happen next, like when we're telling a story and we'd say, oh, but then what happened, or next, or so then, like all those kind of connectors that we use, that's how they're using it here in the Vulgate Latin. So it sort of has a vague meaning, and it's just indicating to the reader that they're continuing the story. So it gets translated in various ways. Anyway, surgens autem Jesus, de synagoga. So de is a preposition that means concerning or about or from or down from. It has a lot of different meanings. And then synagoga means synagogue. Introit, you can see we get the word introit from this, which is the entrance psalm. Introits. When you're chanting or praying the liturgy or whatever. And this, the vit here, the vit, means that it's in the perfect tense. So it's he entered. It means enter. So he entered. In here really means into. So in is one of these prepositions that can either mean on or in or inside of, or it can mean into or at. And you can tell what it means by what case ending is on the end of this word. So this is in domum, is in the accusative case, so that means that in means into. So into, domum means house or home, into the house, Simonis, of Simon. So that is on the end of Simon is the genitive singular for the third declension. So the way Latin works is it doesn't depend on word order the way English does. Instead, it is an inflected language, which just means that it relies on the endings of the words to tell you the role that each word is playing in the sentence or in the clause. So, and different nouns have different rules they follow according to whatever declension they're in, whatever group they're in. And third declension nouns, the singular genitive, or what we call possessive in English, ends in is. So that's why that makes that genitive. Socrus autem. Okay, socrus. I had to look this one up because I have never come across it. Not that that's unusual. I'm not that learned. But it means mother-in-law. So socrus autem, again, here's a new sentence. Simonis, same thing. Tenebatur. Can you see? I don't know if I'm showing this to you well enough. Tenebatur. So the root meaning of this is to hold or contain. We get words like tentative or tenacious, or came through Middle French into English spelled T-A-I-N. So that's like containment. All those words are related to this Latin word. So tenebatur, the B-A there, indicates that this is the imperfect tense. So it's the continuing past. So in English we would say was holding. And then the tour there means it's third person singular passive. So was being held by, so active and passive. You could say the man held the dog, and that would be active. But if you said the dog was being held by the man, that would be passive, right? So this is passive. And then magnis febribus. And this, you probably can guess, is from the word for great or big or large. And, we get magnify and all kinds of derivatives from that one. And then the febribus, the febris part has to do with fever. So we say febrile or febrile. How do we pronounce that in English? You can talk about fevers that way. Febrile. Like febrile seizures, like little children who get high fevers and have seizures. It comes from that same root. So febribus. Why I can't talk today. Febribus. Anyway, then et means and then rogaverunt. This is the word for question. So we get interrogatives, right? Those are when you ask questions, right? So interrogatory. So it comes from the same root. And the verunt there, well, the NT signals that it's a third person plural, so it's they. And then the verunt part shows that it's in the perfect, so it's the completed past. So, and they asked, illum is a demonstrative pronoun meaning him, and then pro is a preposition that means for or on behalf of or even in front of. And then ea is the third person singular feminine ablative pronoun. So personal pronoun. All right, so you got all that? Okay, so let's see if we can translate it. And this is the story of Jesus going and healing Simon's mother-in-law. So surgens rising autumn, don't know how to translate that yet. Jesus from the synagogue, de synagoga, introivit, entered into indomum Simonis, into the house of Simon. Socrus, the mother-in-law, autumn, of Simon, tenebatur, was being held by magnis febribus, great fevers. And rogaverunt, they asked illum him pro ea, on behalf of her. So going through this, I had fun going through that and parsing it, but then I looked at the English translation that is in the Vulgate. Now I thought this was St. Jerome's Vulgate, but it's really the Clementine Vulgate, which came much later, I think in 1521 or something. I'm not sure about the date, but it was under some Pope Clement. However, it doesn't matter because it's exactly the same as St. Jerome's. I mean, they just took it from St. Jerome. And so it says here, they translate it, and Jesus rising up out of the synagogue went into Simon's house. And Simon's wife's mother was taken with a great fever, and they besought him for her. So surgens autem Jesus de synagoga, and Jesus rising up out of the synagogue, introvit in domum Simonis, went into Simon's house. So, went into, I guess, is okay to say. It sounds better to me to say entered into Simon's house. And Simon's wife's mother. So back in those days, I don't think in-law had quite the concrete meaning it has today. When we say in-laws, we mostly mean mother and father-in-law. But even in Jane Austen, sometimes she'll refer to somebody's in-laws and it won't be exactly how we see in-laws. So I think they didn't really have a good word for it, maybe. Because why the awkward translation of and Simon's wife's mother? Just seems kind of verbose or something, or awkward. Was taken with a great fever, and they besought him for her. So besought, I guess, it's the past tense of beseech. I guess you could say beseech, but this is old-fashioned English. So, and they besought him for her. They beseeched him for her. But the thing that puzzled me was the magnus febribus is plural. And they translate it was taken with a great fever. But in the Latin it says was being held by great fevers. So why is there a difference there? Why is one plural and one singular? What was going on there? So I started looking up other translations. I looked in this translation, which is, it's the North American Bible, I think it's called. New American Bible, which I think is a Catholic Bible. And it says here, after he left the synagogue. So they're using that autumn to sort of mean after or next, After he left the synagogue, he entered the house of Simon. Simon's mother-in-law was afflicted with a severe fever. So instead of saying great, they're saying severe, but they've made it singular instead of plural. And they interceded with him about her. So they're using rogaveron to mean intercede, which I think is a weird translation. With him about her, that you can use pro to mean about, so that's fine. I didn't have a problem with that one. And then I started looking at it. It made me so curious because why is the Vulgate have more than one fever and everybody else just has one? So I looked up the different translations of that one line. So this is from, which Bible is this from? This is from the English Standard Version. And he arose and left the synagogue. So they're kind of adding words there because it doesn't say he left the synagogue. But I guess they're saying the D-E, the day part, meant that he left the synagogue and entered Simon's house. Now Simon's mother-in-law was ill with a high fever, and they appealed to him on her behalf. Okay, that word appealed is important because, wait a second, I've got it on here. Because if you go to the Greek, can you see this? I looked it up, the Greek, because I wanted to see if the Greek had it plural. And if, when he was translating, he just assumed because, it could be that they just colloquially referred to fevers as more than one thing. I don't understand. There are little quirky things about language. But the way they translate it here, I'm at BibleHub.com, interlinear. It says, this is translated from the Greek, having risen up, then out of the synagogue, he entered into the house of Simon. The mother-in-law then of Simon was oppressed with a fever great, and they appealed to him for her. So I like that the rogaverunt is being translated as, or the same word, the word that they put into Latin from the Greek was, they use rogaverunt, but in the Greek, it has a different connotation. It's more about not just asking, but appealing or petitioning. And then I looked for the NIV translation, and they say, Jesus left the synagogue and went to the home of Simon. Now, Simon's mother-in-law was suffering from a high fever, and they asked Jesus to help her. So this, honestly, was my least favorite translation, simply because the language is not very powerful. Jesus left the synagogue. In the Latin, there's a very strong verb here, surgens. He rose up. He rose up from the synagogue. Let me put this down. He rose up from the synagogue. And then this is a strong word that has just a perfectly good English equivalent. He entered. I mean, that's what it says. He entered. So to say, and then he went into, I don't know, it's kind of weak. It's kind of very muted. And then instead of saying, the suffering from a high fever is fine. And then they asked Jesus to help her, but there's no appealing on her behalf. Or I don't know. It just seemed like kind of weaker language. So that one was I looked up the King James Bible, and where did I must have clicked off of that. But I actually like that one the best. It was very beautiful, poetic English, and it really conveyed the strong verbs that were used here. But anyway, I was really curious about why it's magnis febribus. Had anyone noticed that? So I went to the group I'm on on Facebook, where there's a lot of people much more learned than me who are really into Latin, and I asked about that, and they were like, "Wow, we never noticed this." So one person said that it's sort of because they were using because they translated tenebatur, which is the passive imperfect, that it sort of has that sense of continuing, something continuing in the past. And the we use our imperfect very interchangeably with the perfect. But I think in Latin, they're more likely to use the perfect unless they're specifically talking about something that's sort of continuing. So maybe pointing out that she had been, seized by multiple fevers, like this had been an ongoing thing, and he was trying to convey that this was an ongoing thing. It wasn't just one fever that she got knocked down with, but that she had been struggling with this ongoing, bouts of fever. But then someone else came and said, it's singular in the Greek. I don't understand why he made it plural. The only thing that this guy could think of was that to the Roman mind, putting it this way, with the tenebatur magnis febribus, with the plural of great fevers, it might refer in the Roman mind to the goddess Febris. So, and there were 3 temples to this goddess, who was the goddess of the fever. I guess when you had a fever, you went and prayed to her. And so that would have struck a note with them. And so maybe Jerome was kind of implying that it was some sort of pagan deity or something that was, or that they would just have understood the context of this better. I don't know. Anyway, the guy said, I'm just speculating. I have no idea why he would do that. Anyway, I was really pleased that I found this weird inconsistency in this one sentence that I happened to want to parse. So anyway, I don't know how boring that was, but oh my gosh, I can't believe how fast time goes when I'm babbling into this camera. Anyway, so that was my little Latin lesson. It really is fun. I love translating. I wish if I had the opportunity to come back in another life, I would have been a language person, a linguist. Anyway, so sorry for boring you for so long. Bye.